Hey everybody, Laurie Goldman here. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of For the Sake of the Argument, where we had House Rep District 17, Laurie Pohutsky on. And I hope you took away from this a few things. It is fucking hard to be in office, and it's fucking harder to be a woman in office. And the sacrifice and the risk to life that these elected officials incur daily makes my blood run cold. So I hope you're learning something, because I certainly am. Check me out For the Sake of the Argument on all the social medias and help raise my numbers so you can learn more. Talk to you soon. Representative Laurie Pohutsky, welcome to For the Sake of the Argument. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love your first name. My name's Laurie, too. Unfortunately, your mother spelled it the wrong way.
She did.
But
She did.
that's okay. So I've known you for about 10 years now. Didn't we first meet? I can't remember exactly the first time, but weren't we at a Michigan United political training thing that went on?
I believe so. Yeah, like at their offices in Detroit. Yeah. It was a very long time ago now.
I felt like when I went to middle school and there was a kid I knew in class. So I was so glad to see you. So anyway, you've been in the Michigan House since 2019, and you flipped a historically red House seat to blue. Tell us about what's your district number, where's that seat located, and what was it like doing that?
Yeah, so when I flipped that seat, that was pre-redistricting in 2020. So back in 2018 when we flipped it, it was just the city of Livonia with 1 square mile carved out, which was conveniently where there was a lot of Democratic votes. It was a very, very gerrymandered district. And it had been historically Republican. Now, post-redistricting, my district is still a bit of Livonia, the northeast corner, North Redford Township, which is actually where I grew up, and a little bit of northwest Detroit. When I first won, it was District 19. I now represent District 17.
There's an ongoing debate within the Democratic Party, I think we're all aware of that, about the direction the party should take in the future. Should Dems try to maintain the moderation that we're in right now or become more progressive? What's your take on that?
I'm a firm believer in people know the districts they represent. And that cuts both ways. When I first won that really, really tough seat, in 2019, the seat that I held was the most marginal seat that we had in the Michigan House. I won that seat by 227 votes. There were a lot of times where I was, dressed down in back rooms and told you have to take the safe route. You have to, take the moderate route. And that was wrong. I campaigned in a way where I didn't lie to anyone. People knew who they were electing. People knew who they were going to be represented by. So no one was surprised by any of the votes I took. And I think that we have an issue with authenticity in a way that then makes it really difficult for us to hold firm in our values, which I believe progressive values are democratic values. That's not to say that there aren't some times where, a district might not be ready for a certain policy stance or something like that. But I really think that we play it far too safe. And that's part of why we haven't been successful, because people just assume that we're just kind of lacking when it comes to really standing firm with a lot of these policies.
I agree. And I don't think we've been living or practicing our more progressive ideals, which most of us believe in,
Agreed.
Even Republicans.
Right.
J.D. Vance was recently in Howell, Michigan. Sorry, I missed that. Calling for a National Guard deployment in Detroit. Big surprise. At the end of August, you have introduced a bill in the legislature to prohibit the deployment of military forces into Michigan without the approval from the governor. Explain what the status of that bill is right now, and how would it protect us if Trump does target Detroit?
So the bill is languishing in committee, which frankly is unfortunately what I expected to happen. My Republican colleagues have called a lot of things authoritarianism over the years, but they kind of seem to struggle to actually identify it when it's happening in our country. That bill would protect us by frankly just providing courts one more avenue to block unlawful and unconstitutional actions like sending the National Guard into our city without a valid reason. So for better or worse, the courts are sort of our last line of defense. And I think that they've been, relatively speaking, the most successful line of defense we've had. In California, that was how the governor engaged in an effort to block the deployment. And it worked. And now in Chicago, we're hearing that things have sort of cooled there because the federal government isn't looking to lose another case. So there is no one really easy solution to stop actions like this when you have, a federal administration that is just ignoring the rule of law. You have to try and make sure that you bolster up the defenses that we do have. So making sure that we have made it crystal clear in our state law that you cannot just federalize the National Guard and send them in because you feel like it. I had an interview with a radio station where they talked about how much safer DC has gotten and, how the National Guard is out there raking leaves. The National Guard is not a lawn service. This is a very real thing that we have done. We have activated our military against civilians in our country. We fought a war about that, a big one. So making sure that we have all of the safeguards in place as we possibly can is just really, really important. And codifying that federal provision in our state law gives courts one more thing that they can point to should troops be sent into Detroit.
One thing I want to get clarification on, you said that your bill is languishing in committee because Republicans are against authoritarianism.
Well, I mean, they say that they are.
Well, I'm
not sure
because
that they are, though.
well, I guess not, because we're talking about the National Guard coming here. And right. I want to just shout out to the National Guard, not their fault, but it's got to be pretty fucking hard to rake leaves when you've spent the night sleeping on a parking structure cement floor.
Exactly.
That's all I'm saying. It's hard to get up and do that.
Exactly. And I frankly, I don't want to hear one more word about, Republicans are the ones supporting our troops when this is what you're sending them out to do, and also doing it in such a way that they're not getting paid for the full time either.
Yeah, I hope everybody remembers that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Laurie, you've been open about your decision to undergo sterilization and the intense backlash you received, including, surprisingly, or maybe not, death threats. Can you talk about why you chose to share that part of your story publicly and what that experience taught you about the climate for women in politics?
Yeah, absolutely. The decision to not expand our family any further was something that my husband and I have been talking about for a really long time. And then after the election, we had further conversations about whether or not there were going to be impacts to contraception or my ability to get that surgery if the window was closing with that. And then, we made an appointment with, my doctor and we got the surgery scheduled. And my surgery was actually scheduled the week of the inauguration. And we had talked because I also didn't want to miss session. I scheduled it at a time where we were not supposed to be doing too much. And then we ended up having a pretty serious vote about minimum wage and paid sick time that was scheduled that week. So I did think about rescheduling it. And then, the day of the inauguration and then that entire week, there's all these crazy executive orders that are being issued. And mind you, most of them did not have the force of law, but we started seeing people
implementing.
Yes, exactly, as though this was something that they had to do. And we discussed it and decided, no, I wasn't going to risk rescheduling it, knowing that there were, increases in people asking to have this surgery. I didn't know what it would look like if it had to be pushed out a couple of months. So I underwent the surgery and, talking to people in my life about it, I realized that there were a lot of other people, a lot of other young women who were considering this surgery, but had sort of done the same back and forth that I had about, am I overthinking this? Am I being dramatic? Am I in my own head too much? And when I talked about it publicly, one, I didn't think that the entire world was going to care about this. I didn't think that there was going to be morning shows in Australia talking about my surgery. But I thought that, someone who had been considering whether or not this was the moment and whether or not they were, in a position where it was the right time to make this decision, I wanted them to feel validated. I wanted them to hear from another woman, you are not hysterical. You are not being dramatic. If this is a concern for you, you should feel empowered to act on it. You should be able to make whatever decision you need to in this moment. But if you are worried about the political moment that we are all in, that's okay. You're not overthinking it. The backlash really validated for me the decision to undergo that surgery. Because I'm sorry, you do not threaten to kill a woman who made a choice that does not impact you whatsoever unless you find something offensive about that choice. And we know what this administration is doing to things they find offensive. So I do think, here in Michigan, we are really, really fortunate. Our Constitution protects reproductive autonomy. Our state laws do. But that can't compete with federal law. And I do not think that bodily autonomy is a settled question at all.
No.
And I do not think that, I think that we are coming up very quickly during a time in our history where women's value is going to be based on their reproductive potential. And I think that the backlash to that, to what I did, was because I am a white woman of childbearing age who found a cheat code. And I think that that was offensive to people who think that my primary function in life is bearing children. So I felt very validated in what I did. It was a really, really weird time. Like, for 2 weeks, people were just talking about like my fallopian tubes and, whether or not this was a publicity stunt, if I was launching a Senate campaign. Like it was absurd. It was offensive and absurd and the dumbest thing. But what did end up happening was women also reached out because they saw the backlash. They recognized, oh, wow, this is a scary moment. And they felt empowered to make whatever decision was right for them. But they felt that they were being validated in that moment. And so people reached out and talked about their own experiences, just offered support. And I had constituents come to coffee hours because they thought that weirdos might show up, and they did. And it was just, it was a really sort of unifying moment in the midst of what was just like a really difficult time. I'm not, unfortunately, unfamiliar with getting death threats. But like to have the entire world talking about something when I really didn't think it was that big of a deal, it was just a really weird time. And I think just kind of a indicator of the moment that we're living in.
Yeah. Another negative about being a woman is everything that we do gets put under a microscope. If an elected male politician had made the same decision, nobody would have batted an eyelash. So
no, and there was actually a reporter, it's a blogger, who came to my coffee hour and wanted to talk about my surgery and wanted to talk about how I was like coping with fame and all this ridiculous stuff. And somebody just asked him, they were like, if she was a man and she had gotten a vasectomy, you wouldn't be here. And he went, well, no, of course I wouldn't.
All right. Let's talk about the Michigan House. We still don't have a budget, and the state is staring down the possibility of a shutdown.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what actually is happening now about that and why House Speaker Matt Hall's budget, I'm going to have to gargle after I say his name, with cuts to Medicaid, schools, and public safety is such a non-starter for Democrats?
Absolutely. So October 1, if we don't have a budget, we go into a state shutdown. There are going to be essential functions that maintain. But what I want people to know is that even within those essential departments, so like the Department of Health and Human Services, MSP, state police, things like that, people are still going to be furloughed. So your ability to reach out to people if you have any issues or any interruptions is going to be limited because we're going to be placing a lot of staff on furlough.
Just bare bones will be operating these necessary departments.
Exactly. This might matter to some folks. The Liquor Commission and lottery, That's not an essential service. So like some stores are already, not some, all stores are being told, your liquor orders need to be placed last week, because if you place it on September 29th, you're not getting it.
Oh, even bars will be affected in restaurants, not
Exactly.
just going to the corner store.
Exactly. That's not a critical thing, but like people's day-to-day lives are going to be impacted by this. And particularly the most vulnerable people who rely on state services are going to be in a position where if anything goes wrong with any of those, we, in our office, we deal with constituent services every single day. So if we get someone reach out and say, hey, I went to a doctor's appointment and they said that my Medicaid was discontinued and I don't know why. It's not that the Medicaid offices are not going to be operable. They are, but they're going to be operating with very, very few staff, just the bare minimum. It's going to take longer for us to get answers just by virtue of people not being there. And as for why any of the budgets that have come in front of the House, particularly the last one that made severe cuts to Medicaid and public safety, that's a non-starter for us because it hits our constituents in some of the weakest points. And it's not just Democratic constituents either, which is what I really don't understand. We're already going to be dealing with federal cuts to Medicaid. We're going to be dealing with federal cuts across the board. We need to be bolstering those with state dollars as best we can. We can't make up all of those gaps. I understand that. But we don't need to be cutting services even more during a time where things are already so uncertain because of the federal cuts that we're seeing.
If this shutdown happens, name one thing that's going to be shocking to our audience that Michigan families are going to feel first.
I think people don't realize, we talk a lot about like how all politics is local and how, your state legislatures are important, but your state services, period, are important. I think that people don't realize in your day-to-day life how many times you interact with a state department.
The Secretary of State.
Secretary
daily.
of State's office, exactly. Consumer protections through the Attorney General's office. Revenue sharing as that comes down from the state to your local public safety, police and fire. Virtually everything you interact with on a day-to-day basis has some tie back to the state. Like we said, even going out and trying to grab a bottle of wine for dinner, like that's going to be impacted. And I just don't think that people realize how often you interact with a state service that is going to be impacted.
What's one thing you wish more people understood about the work that you and your colleagues are doing in the House right now?
That a lot of it is underreported and it takes a little bit of effort to find sometimes. So there are a lot of journalists that are working really, really hard that I've developed really great relationships with. And because we are not in the majority in the House, and because it sort of all levels, like Matt Hall is doing a great job of this, Donald Trump is doing a great job of this, of flooding the zone. They have to be very judicious, or, their editors might have differing opinions than them on what needs to be covered. So there are times where I've introduced things and reached out to the journalists that I have really solid relationships with.
Introduce bills.
Yes. And they've just said, I can't make that work. Like I can't cover it. We won't pick it up. So there are, ways that we are trying to amplify what we're doing, because obviously people, it's not enough to just complain. You have to have solutions. And I'm a firm believer in that. But the number of times where I go to community events and people say like, well, I didn't hear about that. I know. And that really upsets me too. But like, we post about it on social media. We do send out press releases, and all of those press releases are on my website, even if no one, reprints them or anything like that. And I know everyone is overwhelmed, but part of the bargain that we have all made in this really deeply overwhelming moment is that if we are going to engage in this process and we're going to try and fix it and get things back on course, we have to work harder in the minority to try and, get us to a place where we can actually effectuate some of this. And our constituents have to work just a little bit harder to find information about it. Because if we've learned anything over the last couple of weeks, but, longer than that, the media is not always going to talk about that work because it's not always in their best interest.
No, and how much longer will we have media?
Exactly.
You recently posted a wild voicemail of someone screaming at you. With political violence and threats on the rise, like, you getting this crazy voicemail, How does that level of hostility affect your work in Lansing? Your ability to go to work every day?
Yeah, I have to be honest. I was sort of surprised by the reaction to that voicemail because that one wasn't scary to me. It was funny.
What were they mad about?
I think it was the National Guard bill. It's kind of hard to tell because at a certain point, and I know that, Distill played it recently, but at one point she's just shrieking into the phone. I don't even think there were words. It was just shrieks. But that was not one of the more disturbing voicemails I've gotten. I really posted it because it was just kind of like, this is funny. But in terms of the actual threats, which
what was the worst one you ever got?
I don't know. We went to trial over one. A guy called my office, and this was right after April 30th in 2020 when they came into the Lansing Capitol and were planning on shooting us and setting the Capitol on fire. He called my office and spoke with my staff and said, you can let her know I'm polishing up my AR-15 and next time she won't be able to run. And we went to court over that. And he told the jury, well, yeah, I said it, but who can blame me? Who hasn't wanted to say that to a politician? And they acquitted him.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And later that afternoon, he was back on Twitter saying abhorrent shit to me. So that's up there. After my surgery, I had someone call and say, I'm in Wayne County. I'm a constituent. And I just want you to know that we're sick of you Democrats, and it's going to be on site. Which, that's an explicit threat. I had someone show up at my house one time and refuse to leave. I was out. My neighbor called me and was like, I don't know where you are, but stay where you are. We're trying to deal with it, but you stay gone until we get this guy to leave. Those are the actual threats that worry me. And in terms of what that means for how I go to work, I carry quick clot gauze, which is like military grade gauze that has a coagulant in it. I carry that on me at all times. It's in my office as well because sometimes people threaten to come to the office.
Explain what you're saying right now.
In case someone gets shot. We keep it at the house, we keep it in the office, and I keep it on me at all times.
And what do? You put it on a wound, a gunshot wound?
Yeah, you can pack it, and it hopefully will cause it to clot.
This is I don't even know what to say to you. Why do you go to? I don't know. You go to work every day still.
There are certainly times where I have worried because especially after Minnesota, for better or worse, it had never dawned on me that my family could get hurt. Those moments, I'm like, oh man, maybe I can't do this. For better or worse, I have decided that I am, I have made this commitment, and whatever the political moment we're in right now is aside, I've decided I'm going to do this, but not my family. But if I quit, they win. And the message that is sent is if you are just scary enough, then you can have your way. And people who disagree with you and want us to not, capitulate to fascism will exit. And I don't want that to be the message. I don't like bullies. And at the base of it, they might be scary. They might, say heinous shit to me, but they're bullies. And I'm not capitulating. So, we take precautions. We try and stay as safe as we can. There are times where I have told my staff to not come in.
You're not walking around in the neighborhood with your headphones in and your face in your phone. You always have to be aware.
Yeah.
I apologize for the lack of humanity.
You didn't do it.
No, I know.
It's okay.
I know, but you know what? We're part of the human race. And unlike what many people think, we all do have responsibility in how our fucking world keeps turning or doesn't.
Well, and when I posted that voicemail, like I said, I did it because I was like, oh, this is funny. This is a weird thing that happened. But the response that people had, because there were a lot of people on TikTok who were like, you need to call the police. And the police are not going to, don't respond half the time when it is a real threat. They certainly weren't going to do anything about this because it wasn't an actual threat to harm me. But it did indicate to me that a lot of people don't realize how often we do get actual death threats and threats of violence or sexual violence. That happens with us a lot. After my surgery, we talked about that. I had people threatening to rape me because now there were no consequences. And that happens a lot more than I think people realize.
Yeah.
And I do think that elected officials need to do a better job of talking about that. And, maybe that was the lesson that I took from that. This was a funny voicemail that I posted, but people were alarmed by this frankly unacceptable behavior. It may have not been threatening, but you don't call people and shriek and call them a bitch and all manners of other stuff on a voicemail. That is unhinged behavior. So it did sort of tell me that a lot of people don't realize how prevalent threats of violence are in politics these days.
No, I feel better about what I get as being a realtor. My voicemails.
I can't
Nothing
even imagine,
near that.
though.
Nothing near that. And I think what you do isn't worth the money or the sacrifice, but thank God you're here to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that means you're not afraid of your fellow Democrats either, I hope, because too many people are.
Yeah.
Let's do the lightning round. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Death threats to lightning round. Isn't that a fucking great transition? What are your favorite things to cook, bake? Because we know you like that stuff.
I do. I really like baking cupcakes and cakes. I've been trying to get better at decorating, but I make a lot of pasta in terms of just regular cooking.
Wow. Well, you don't look like you're eating a lot of it, so good for you.
I appreciate that.
Wasn't that a sexist thing to say? Do you have a political figure to look up to?
Oh, man, I guess cue the hate comments, but I really do still admire Elizabeth Warren. I know that that's probably a deeply unpopular thing to say, but she's smart. She's a policy wonk. And man, as a woman who has just been kind of poo-pooed for knowing what she's talking about and being willing to, admit that, I have a soft spot in my heart for her.
Yeah, fair assessment. Who gives the best side eye on the House floor?
Angela Whitwer. Angela Whitwer does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fall is here. So is it pumpkin spice? Yes or no?
Yes, that's actually what's in my cup.
Really?
Yeah, I did homemade pumpkin syrup and yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, with that shutdown looming, I'd be filling all of your cups and saucers with booze.
Before we can't.
Yeah. Last question. Favorite guilty pleasure TV show?
I just started watching Grey's Anatomy.
You're kidding.
No, a friend of mine she had made a comment and I was like, I've never watched this show. And she was like, you've got to watch it. And it's been a really nice sort of disconnect from everything. So I'm going to have to go with that one just because of the sheer amount of it I've been watching lately.
Okay. That's a throwback.
Yeah.
Let's end on this. Laurie Pohutsky, what advice do you have for women thinking of running for office? Which, if they're smart after this session, they will never run for anything except run away.
You've got to have a thick skin in a way that your male colleagues will not understand. It's really, really lonely because you can have the best support system in the world, but at the end of the day, your name is on the ballot. You are the one pushing the button. It's a lonely, isolating thing. Do it anyway, though. Do it anyway, because if we cave to what is around us right now, it's never going to get any better. And I'm sorry, the policies that I have worked on that I think have been most impactful to the state and have made the biggest difference were carried by women. And that's not to take anything away from my male colleagues, but it's just a different kind of public service. So, go into it eyes wide open, know that it's going to be dangerous and scary and lonely and exhausting, and just do it anyway.
Thank you, Laurie Pohutsky.
Thank
you for being here.
Thank you.